Hello and welcome everyone to the Start at Home webinar. My name is Michelle Bonner, Senior Manager of Financial Inclusion and Impact here at the National Credit Union Foundation. We are joined here today by Mike Jones, Director of Member Research and Analytics at Educational Employees Credit Union, and Evelyn Fedacco, Chief Governance Officer at Credit Human, and Ted Coy, Director of Innovation at Alabama Credit Union. We also have with us today researchers Jeremy Burke, senior economist at the University of Southern California's Center of Economic and Social Research, along with Mariel Beasley. She's the co-founder at the Common Sense Lab at Duke University. Thank you all for being here. In today's webinar, we'll hear from all of these Start at Home grantees who will share the findings, best practices, challenges, and opportunities of the recent grant project. Through these firsthand accounts, we're going to take a deep dive into the opportunities and interventions that can improve credit union employees' financial well-being as well as their financial health, and doing so through innovative grant projects. I'll share a brief overview of the project before we get started. As many of you know, with a lot of Americans just struggling to accumulate savings, and perhaps overwhelmed by unexpected expenses, we know that these issues aren't just faced by members alone. This also affects our employees. And so National Credit Union Foundation wanted to uncover whether a simple intervention, something like a pop-up message or an email, could effectively influence the savings behaviors of the employees. And in doing so, perhaps that could also improve their financial well-being overall. So the grant funded the university staff, the development of the study and the interventions, as well as the data collection and analysis, which we'll hear about more shortly. But in short, each credit union randomly selected employees to receive emails, and these emails included financial tips, and for some, it also included the opportunity to either split their deposits into savings or investments accounts. So spoiler alert, it worked. In this light touch, participants were able to opt into, and they did opt into their splitting their deposits for savings. And we saw even at one credit union, an 11% uptick. So we're excited. I know you all are. And just another spoiler, there's just so much data here that you'll hear today. We want to provide this webinar to you afterwards. So stay tuned, clock in, and we'll hear more. And with that, I think we can just jump right in. I want to talk first with Jeremy. I want to talk with the researchers first to hear, your goals. What were the research goals? What was the methodology for a project like this? If you would, Jeremy and Mariel.
Sure. So I can just piggyback off you said. Our goals are really to see, are there light touch interventions that we can leverage to really help improve Americans, and particularly credit union employees' financial lives by helping them build savings behaviors and attitudes towards increasing their short-term savings outcomes. So it's a ton of research and interventions in the retirement space on how to help people improve their retirement savings behavior, but relatively less research on improving short-term savings. So we really wanted to see if we could sort of borrow an idea from the retirement space, sort of splitting one's paycheck and sending someone directly into retirement and using clever strategies to help them enroll in those programs, so that we could do something similar for short-term savings. So our goal, I think, was to help employees build a habit of savings, not necessarily build up a specific amount of savings, but really start to, at each paycheck, direct some of it towards savings and build up this habit of hopefully setting that aside for financial emergencies. Can we do that relatively low cost through emails and pop-ups, as Michelle mentioned, and then see how that affects both their savings behavior and how they feel about their financial situation. So both objective and subjective measures of the intervention success. And the way we did that is to use sort of our gold standard evaluation methodology is through a randomized controlled trial. So essentially, for each employee in the study, we flipped a coin into whether they were in the treatment group or the control group, and then compared outcomes across those random coin flips. So everything else is held constant. The only thing that's different between the treatment and control group is the variations of the emails and pop-ups they saw, and see that helps us identify the causal effects of what that intervention was, As Michelle mentioned, we were able to see that it was led to a statistically significant increase in savings take up at in the treatment groups, which was I thought was really exciting, led to some relatively moderate effects on savings behavior, which weren't significant across all the credit unions. But we did see that there was a significant increase in people's subjective perceptions of their financial situation. So they felt like they were in better savings conditions, better savings health than before the intervention started. So we were pretty excited to see that.
So if I may, what exactly was being measured? Was it just the savings? Was it just financial health score? What exactly was being measured?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we measured 3 primary outcomes. One is whether or not you're splitting your direct deposit into savings. That was sort of the first measure on which the intervention was designed to have an impact. So that was the primary method through which the effect might have on 2 secondary outcomes. The secondary outcomes were balances in checking and savings accounts. So we looked at both savings accounts and then balances in both checking and savings accounts within the credit union. And third, we fielded a survey to employees both before the intervention started, measuring their financial health score. Essentially, this is a series of 8 questions measuring how they think they're doing on savings behavior, how they're doing on insurance, credit health, and the like. And then we also measured that after the intervention, about I think 8 months after the intervention launched. So we could track changes in their financial health score pre and post being exposed to our intervention. And so we looked at both changes in savings behavior and savings levels and changes in financial health scores, both on savings dimensions and on other dimensions.
Thank you for that. And if I may, pass it to Mariel, because I'm curious how this all kind of started and what your role was in this.
Yeah, so it basically started through the foundation, right? So basically they said, hey, we're really interested in figuring out a way to help employees and at credit unions. And they said, but we also want to make sure that it's done in a rigorous way, that we can really share out the insights with the broader community. And so that was the opportunity where Jeremy and I kind of jumped in and said, oh, well, we'd love to help do that. We'd love to help sort of think through the research process so that we really could have sort of as much confidence as possible in the results of sort of, is this working? Is this promising to do? And that was actually something that's also pretty unique, I think, about this project when we think about projects in the credit union space, but also research projects in general, is that in order to do this in a rigorous way, we actually really needed the collaboration across these multiple credit unions. We couldn't just work with Credit Union, or we couldn't just work with Alabama, we couldn't just work with EECU, because we needed to have enough employees. And this is a little bit of an important thing. We had to have enough employees that weren't already splitting their direct deposit, but we had to have enough sort of employees to be able to have that statistical significance that Jeremy talked about. And so it was really the only way we could get there was by doing this across all 3 credit unions. And so it was, this is kind of my own personal feelings on this. It is really a remarkable and thing to be able to achieve a research project where we were able to, fairly consistently do this across 3 different organizations that have 3 different processes, that have 3 different legal departments, that have 3 different, just all of these things that differ and vary, have kind of different cultures in the way that they do things. And we had just amazing credit union partners who helped make that possible, to do that lift and say, yeah, we'll figure out how we can do that on our side. And so Evelyn figuring out in Credit Human, and Ted figuring it out in Alabama, and Mike figuring it out at ECU, to say, okay, well, let me figure out how I have to do this here. Because the only way we could actually come away with these really kind of really interesting and hopefully applicable findings for other credit unions was that real coordination and cooperation across the 3 credit unions. And that
right there, cooperation.
A lot of cooperation, which is great.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. That's a key word here in the credit union land, is cooperation. So with that, let's turn to the credit unions, because the grant itself is called Testing What Works, just to advance financial well-being for your employees. And my question is, though we know it works, I'm curious, how did it work? Perhaps Ted and Evelyn, you can take it away.
Yeah, no, it was actually interesting. because we've worked for a long time, understanding our members and what engages them with us, right? And we spend so much time in understanding, okay, how do we get a new offer in front of them? How do we get them to take that offer, and really go through mapping that journey that we're wanting the member to go through. And it was interesting doing this for our employees, right? Because obviously it has implications on what we can do for our members as well, right? There are a lot of them are in the same boats. And we had never really sat down and mapped this out for our employees to say, okay, how do we set this up so that we can give our employees a journey to financial education and give them the tools to be successful, right?
I think it's definitely a journey. I know, Evelyn, you were already starting something similar to this, but of course, working with your fellow credit unions here and the researchers, taking it to another level. Can you share a little bit about that with us?
Sorry, we've been, now can you hear me? Great, sorry about that. We've been working really hard on our mission, and really defining what that is for us, what the congressionally mandated mission for federal credit unions is, and translating that into what that means for us. And we've come up with, it really is about alleviating financial stress by helping our members create and maintain, we call it financial slack, which is financial wellness, really under having more income than you have outflow, or more savings than you have to have debt. So we've been really focusing on that. And of course, we focus on it from a member perspective, and helping, of course, our employees figure out how to connect with members. But it's interesting that we kind of feel like our employee base kind of knows these things intuitively, right? And that's not always the case. And so it was really surprising to me that this very simple intervention could really make the big difference that it did. I mean, we had 11% really go ahead and take us up on the offer. And, so this was super easy to do. I mean, the challenge was the coordination between the three credit unions, although that was pretty seamless, but, it does take a little bit of extra effort. And working with the researchers was a joy, and understanding how to do these kinds of randomized trials. I think that was really beneficial. And we actually connected a team of folks within the credit union as well, so that more people could get exposed to just doing this process, because we'd like to replicate it for other events that we might try to roll out. So we were really pleased with the results here.
Well, I love that. I absolutely love that it was a success for you. I'm curious, what about the researchers? Do you see this as a success? 11%, that's wonderful. 3.5, I mean, just one person even, but I'm curious if you all see this as a success. Perhaps Mary, you could share a little bit more with us.
Yeah, so I certainly do. I think there's, from a research perspective, right? Oftentimes in academia, we sort of have this significance threshold, right? And it's got to pass this significance threshold, this statistically significant p-values, all of these things that don't actually really matter to almost anybody else outside of academia. But in academia, we're like, oh, if it passes that, that's a success. But I actually was extremely pleasantly surprised by this project, right? I sort of already alluded to it's difficult to coordinate across three organizations. We're dealing with fairly small samples overall to begin with, and essentially because there's not a lot that everybody has in common, it kind of limited what we were able to do as an intervention. And so an email, it's like, yeah, everybody can do that. It's extremely low cost. It's essentially just the time that it takes somebody to send it. And usually, typically this is what we see in behavioral science, is that, these lighter touch interventions have smaller effects, and small effects can be hard to detect. So I was very, I kind of was like, oh gosh, we're doing an email. It's going to be hard to see anything. It'll be, a good experience, but I don't know that we'll get that statistically significant result. And to see that uptake, even though, 11% might not feel like very much. That's big. 7% is big. And so seeing that sort of increase, especially because the intervention cost basically nothing, right? I mean, a little bit of somebody's time. That is a great return. And it was extremely exciting to see that result. But the other thing that I would add that was another really unusual sort of bonus in this research project was that we were measuring that before and after on that financial well-being. Again, this is an even smaller sample, so this is a big sort of caveat, star, asterisk. We don't know for sure if this would hold up in a replication, but basically to see that it looks like that not only did it increase people's split direct deposit, but that we actually then see potentially this increase in this perception of financial well-being, of people sort of feeling like they're doing better. And we saw that seemed like that was concentrated in that short-term savings component of that subjective well-being. So that gives sort of further evidence and credence that this was caused through the intervention, and that it might be a little bit more robust than just a sort of weird one-time thing. So I would say it's extremely successful. It's exciting, and very, very much worth kind of trying again and measuring and sort of trying it with more people.
I love that. Great idea. Sure.
So also, I think an important factor for us, and I think for all the credit unions, because I think we discovered, I wasn't aware of this, maybe the others were, that we already had a really high uptake of employees who already split their direct deposit. Ours was almost 50%. So I was surprised to learn that we had so that means the remaining 50 who we chose, who then were the part of the, that we split then into the two groups, the test group and the control group. They were already those who had, for whatever reason, decided not to go that route, right? Since we must have encouraged it previously or whatever. So, that seems like they would have been the harder group to persuade, and yet we still had 22 employees out of 200 choose to go ahead and split their direct deposits. I thought that was great.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I want to hear from Mike. Mike, I know during this grant process, you shared that you have the reason that you started this grant, the reason that you applied for this grant. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, we definitely wanted to try out. We hadn't done a grant before like this, where we partnered with other credit unions and the foundation. So it's kind of testing the waters for how that goes, so that we can see what we can do in the future. Kind of giving back to the whole credit union movement of, if we can provide an experience and some data that is able to help the whole process, that would be fantastic. And along with what Evelyn just said, we had probably 50% of our employees that were in the exempt list because they were already splitting their deposit, or some of them were putting their entire deposit into savings, meaning that their other household members were probably putting into checking. So there's multiple ways that people could be splitting their deposit that we don't even know about. So those people that were in the control and in the treatment group also could be splitting the deposit, and we don't know. We have an option through the same place that holds our 401ks, that you can have a separate savings. You can use that as an emergency fund. But also there's plenty of people that they might be putting their entire check into a checking account either here or at another financial institution, because we allow splitting or a complete deposit to someplace else as well. And then using the bill pay, or pardon me, the online banking, either here or there, to do a periodic or a regular splitting of their pay. So once the money goes in, they then just do it without anybody else having to coordinate anything. And that's kind of the unknown, right? So then getting the people that truly aren't doing anything to join in, and we were pleased with the results.
Well, great. Go for it. Go for it.
Going off something Evelyn and Mike both brought up, is that we were also surprised as researchers how high the take-up of split direct deposit already was at 3 credit unions, which gave me heartburn, frankly, at the beginning of the project. So I thought it's going to be impossible to move these other folks who aren't already doing it, since the credit unions have invested effort to try to get their employees to improve savings in this way. So it is my belief that effects of the intervention that we've done here would be even larger among the population at other credit unions who haven't undertaken the large efforts that these three had to get their employees to split their direct deposit. Because as Evelyn mentioned, in some sense, we were left with people who, for whatever reason, chose not to do it beforehand. And those tend to be more difficult people to move. Also, we have certainly ideas now of ways we can increase take up in other areas too. So in this intervention, we sort of rolled it out to everyone at the same time. People are at different points in their employment at the various credit unions. But from other research we've seen in the behavioral economics space, that trying this intervention at different times, like perhaps most likely to have an effect, my belief would be during employee enrollment. So when people are making their first decision about how they're going to get paid and where they're going to send that money, it's probably a lot more effective than sort of an email out of the blue from HR asking you to readjust your financial life that you've been living for however long you've been with the credit union, or other potential touch points where people are thinking about their financial situation, like at the new year or at the time they get a raise, where their financial life is changing. We think it might be more effective in those situations. But to find that it's effective sort of among a population where we might think it was not likely to be effective at a time that sort of just came out of the blue, and to see that it had an effect under those conditions, I think is really, really encouraging.
I appreciate that ad, because you never know really what to expect with these. And so it's wonderful to work with credit unions who are already interested, already engaged. And I know, Ted, you mentioned engagement, and that looked like different things at your credit union coming from either the executives or from the employee engagement side. I know you kind of dig into that detail. Can you share with us a few aha moments as far as, just applying this intervention and kind of being surprised by that?
Yeah, I mean, Evelyn mentioned this earlier, right? That she was surprised about how easy this was to implement, and to echo that, the only hard part about this was sending Jeremy the data, and tracking the results on a month-to-month basis to make sure that he had good, clean data for that. I think the thing that caused the results, right? There was tracking the results. What caused those results? This is just conjecture, right? But I think it was because we've talked about it for so long, and there was a lot of employees that hadn't done it yet. But the employees, a lot like my members, they know what they need to be doing. Right? They know what ideas and tools exist out there, but sometimes they need a little bit of a push. And an email might go unread, right? But and there's a certain open rate and click-through rate. But I think a lot of employees were surprised that we did the journey mapping, so that when they clicked on the link, it was not to get technical, right? But it was a deep link, right? So it puts you, instead of sending you to the HR page or sending you to, the platform where you know how to clock in, it sent you to the specific page where all you had to do was type in the account number. And we have the SSO in there too, so you didn't have to log in, right? So you just immediately, oh, it's that easy. And I think that worked for employees, and it was interesting because we already knew this about our members, right? We had just never flipped that around and said, well, maybe they just need a oomph, because we know our members, I don't want to say they're lazy, but they need it made as easy as possible, right? And that's how you increase your conversion there. And when we turned that around on the employees, we saw surprising results. And I think it was because a lot of them knew in the back of their head, right? So they have had this constant messaging since they've been employees here. And then you were like, all right, here it is. It's right in front of you. Click here. It's easy.
To be fair, you look at data all day, right? So you said, the hardest part could have been, sending it to Jeremy, getting those reviews from Mariel. But flipping that, like you say, on your employees, did you think it would be, this will be easy? Oh, they'll definitely get it since they have some of those additional resources. I'm curious about that for any of the credit unions.
I can
You know, it
say,
was, go ahead, Mike.
no, please.
I was just going to say, you know, the getting the data right, it was just new data sources, right? So it's not often that you're sending us being, you know, me and Mike, right, the data people at your credit union. You're not sending us normally your HR data or your payroll data, or, you know, because that's really sensitive stuff. But it allowed us to get a really good picture of financial wellness for employees, right? I'd never looked at employee accounts and said, okay, you know, how do I gauge, you know, the liquidity, you know, situation? Like,
Right. The initial data set to send over was challenging for me, because the cleanup was, you know, which one of these accounts are actually valid. You know, if I'm on my relative's account just out of safety measure, are we measuring that in this study? No, we're kind of not. We're measuring my account because I'm on there for safety measures. I'm not really doing anything for that. So trying to weed through thousands and thousands of accounts to figure that out was a challenge. And you know, I'm several emails back and forth between Jeremy, Muriel, and Zorak for, you know, what do I do? How do I do this? And they're like, yeah, you're doing a great job. And they were very encouraging. I can tell you that it was comforting. You're doing a great job. The fact that you're asking these questions, the fact that you're concerned means that we know that you're giving us good data. And then the first true data pull after that, you know, here's the first set of results. It took me a day and a half to figure out. After that, I had the process down 30 minutes, boom, here you go. And it was good.
All right, Jeremy, I think you want to share with us, because please, I mean, that does not sound easy. So I'd love to hear your perspective.
No, I wanted to echo something Mariel said before, that 3 credit unions are really, really great to work with. Research is always messy. Although the intervention was fairly simple in its design, I mean, Mariel and I spent a lot of time thinking about how to make it as easy as possible on employees to sign up for split direct deposit if they wanted to, in a way that fit with the 3 credit unions, HR systems and processes. So the one thing we've seen a lot in other behavioral economics research is that even small, seemingly inconsequential hurdles can have a big effect on people's behavior. And so, as Ted mentioned, you know, we tried to link the emails to get them as close as possible to just click one box and have them sign up as we could. So they didn't have to take a bunch of additional steps to get that they have to overcome in order to sign up for split direct deposit. That's what they chose, they wanted to do. And also to Mike's point, we asked them for a lot. I mean, as researchers, you know, the more data we can get, the better estimates we can have on is this effective and who's it effective for. So I was pleased to hear that they still had a good experience of this, because I felt like there's so many times where we're just like asking, well, can we have more? That's great. Can we have more? Can we have more? And they still would talk to us at the end of this. And I think is a good sign.
Well, that's really, as an employee, thank you for making it easy, right? Sometimes it is just that one click. And honestly, for everyone on the call, maybe this is a nice little wake up call or reminder for us to make it simple and do this for ourselves, or start something like this or challenges like this with our families. But I'm curious, especially because of the times as far as people trying to save, whether it's for a big purchase or something like an emergency savings, what are your thoughts on how this could affect that, whether it's, you know, this scale with 3 credit unions or a grander scale? Mary, I'd like to hear from you.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that, and Jeremy sort of alluded to this earlier, right, is that we very specifically had a goal within this project to increase people splitting their savings, right? This habit of saving, this regular contribution to savings, rather than our goal is to have all employees have $500 in a savings account. And one of the reasons for that is because that makes, you know, I mean, makes success really difficult to measure, because what if I had $500, but then I had an emergency and now I took money out of that. Now I have, you know, $250 on the day that you measure how much I have in that account. Is that failure? Absolutely not, right? That money was there for an emergency. You had an emergency, you used it, and we shouldn't sort of count that as a failure because you because the day that we happened to measure it was not the day that you had that money in the account. And so we really, in this project and other projects, and I think, this sort of ongoing economic issues and the pandemic and all that, emphasize that it's not about having a certain balance. It's about having sort of the regular practice of putting money into a savings account, so that, because emergencies happen, and they're, if an emergency savings account never changes its balance and it only goes up, that means people aren't using it for emergencies, which is what it's for. And so it really should actually be liquid. It should be sort of, being spent down, and the practice is about just always putting money in out of every paycheck, which is why we were so excited about sort of split direct deposit as an option. And the fact that these credit unions already had that sort of functionality, they could already do that if employees signed up. That's why we're like, this is a great opportunity. Let's do this, because that is the way to sort of protect people from economic shocks, not a goal of saying we want everybody to have $500 in a savings account, or we want everybody to have $2,000 in a savings account. It's about the regular putting money into that account.
Nailed it. Nailed it. Absolutely. And I've never really thought about it like that it should be liquid, right? It should be ebbing and flowing and continuously increasing over time. So I love that. Love that. I would like to hear a little bit from Evelyn, because, at this point you're operationalizing an intervention, but you've already been doing this. And so I want to hear, we talked a lot about savings, and there's been, the other option is investments, right? You could either split into your savings or an investment. How was this process for you at your credit union, given that you already had folks kind of invested in this program or invested in something like this?
Well, I think there's always a lot of room for improvement, right? I mean, we talked about 50%, so there's another 50% that could be benefit from doing this as well. I think that we serve our members in doing these types of things. I think Ted alluded to it before, and yet we assume our members understand these things and know these things, right? And really, they don't always. I know that when we were doing our mission work and we were going around the credit union and engaging with employees in small groups, it was really surprising to me to find that at the end of those meetings, I could see that there were employees that were in those that, just from the small information that we were sharing in those, which seemed like simple information to us, right? Because we'd been studying mission, of course, for a couple of years. But it was a lot. They were learning just in there, and that was not what the intent was. It was not a training class. So, we forget that well, we have a lot of young employees and all that kind of thing, and there's a lot of opportunity to continuously improve this. And I know that on our financial health goals for our employees, which it is kind of a strategic objective for us, we actually measure our employees against the Financial Health Network societal, what they measure for Americans in general. And we'd like our employees to look a little bit better than that, or a lot better than that. But and some of our senior leaders were saying, well, we're already there. We already met that goal. Why do we need to continue? Well, we need to continue because it's a moving target, right? It's not static. And employees financial, well, first of all, we have a different base. We have new employees coming in, and also they have emergencies and things happen to your financial situation. It is not static. You don't suddenly get financially well or healthy and then you're going to always stay there. It takes effort, and so I think we need to continue to work on those types of things.
It does take effort, and
Evelyn,
you all have put so much into it. Go for it.
I was going to say, that rings true for us as well. I mean, with COVID and remote work and inflation, this has really affected Alabama credit unions' turnover for employees, and I can only imagine there's there's a lot of other companies, not just credit unions, out there shaking their head at that. you know, it seems like an old idea to us, right? Because it's something, you know, we've been talking about, and this goes for almost any financial product or strategy, right? We're so exposed to it. There's executives on this on the team that are 10, 15, 20 years into this. They've not seen anything new in a very long time. But it's funny because when you're hiring people, especially into those entry level positions, a lot of them don't know, right? And what's an old idea to us is really good for these people because they've not been exposed to that before, right? They've never had to learn about it. Nobody's ever really taken the time to talk to them about it. So, you know, it sounds funny, but you need to sit there and just keep pounding on the drum and, you know, preaching the good word.
And I would add the, you know, we said, oh, the intervention was an email and that got people to sign up. But as has sort of been alluded to, it's more than just an email, right? It, you know, it was a very deliberately designed email, right? There were features of it that, you know, it wasn't just like, oh, let's just email people and say, hey, you could do split direct deposit. It was, let's give people an anchor. Let's let people think about what's the right amount that they should be putting in. So, you know, we, in the email, we sort of suggested an amount, not a dollar amount, and it was just sort of a percent as an example, but we knew that that could make it a little bit easier for people to make that decision. In the email, we really emphasized the ease of signing up and laid out the steps for people to do so that they could sort of manage their expectations of what they would need to provide when they logged in to do this. As Ted mentioned, you know, we tried to figure out how to get the link to get as close to as like possible for them to sort of make just the littlest amount of effort to get it done, rather than sort of just taking them to the doorstep. How can we actually get them all the way into the kitchen? And so really kind of thinking through those pieces within the email. Yes, it's just an email, but it is actually a really thoughtfully designed email that is using sort of these components to make it easier, make it clearer, because as Ted said, you know, we always assume like, oh, a little bit of effort won't do anything. People kind of know that these exist. But a lot of people don't. A lot of people do need the hand holding. And so we actually tried to provide more of that hand holding in the email as a way to help folks come through. And that's, I think that's an important component of it, right? It's not just like, oh, send an email out and people will sign up. It's, you know, be deliberate about the email, be deliberate about how you frame it. And I know that in the report, it sort of has some examples of the email text that was sent out. So people can kind of understand what we're talking about.
And
Absolutely.
that's a really good point. You know, we say this was a really easy intervention, and it was really easy in a way for us. I mean, we had the data collection, yes, but it was really easy for us because you all did so much of that work to help us design a really good email. I mean, it's really true. You can't just send out an email and say, hey, sign up for direct deposit today. Here's the link. There was a lot more to it than that. And then you helped us design the frame, and then we were able to make adjustments to fit it to our culture and help our employees, in our case, at least, to help our employees connect to what they know we're trying to also do for members. So this seemed, you know, very congruent to them, and you know, hopefully alleviated the issue of, oh, my leaders, my managers are telling me to do something. I don't really want to do this. You know, it fit with what all we were doing in the credit union as a credit union. And so it was easy for them to then move on it.
And that's
If I-
perfect. You'll go. Yeah, go for it.
The other thing I want to add to that is there's also a lot of thought into how employees would react to the emails that they're getting, even if it's well designed, right? So we had to think carefully about all the credit unions have fraud prevention efforts, and don't click on links. That's generally advice that your company's IT department will give you to all employees. And so we had to do some work at the outset at the credit union, sending sort of a pre-email describing that there's going to be this effort or educational effort coming directly from the credit union to help avoid perceptions that they're being spammed or phished with these emails trying to get them to sign up for direct deposit. So there's also some thought, certainly a lot of thought that went into the emails themselves, but then also thinking through the the employee's journey and what they're going to think about when they see the email the first time they see it. It was also, I think, quite important to set the stage and give the intervention the best chance for success rather than people immediately deleting the email because it might look like spam.
Sure. And we appreciate you managing their expectations, as you mentioned before. So while I have you, Jeremy and Mariel, you mentioned that it took a little longer than it could have expected. Perhaps you would add some additional trigger points, right? To say, hey, let's do it during onboarding or during open enrollment, and maybe even just truly defining what that success metric will look like. For you, how do you go about expanding this project or this program or repeating it with other credit unions? We've got about a minute, so I do want to hear from you all, and I've got another question for the credit unions.
Okay, I can go quickly. So the biggest constraint, at least on my side, is more interested partners. So if there's other credit unions on the call or other partners interested in an intervention like this, please come talk to Mariel and I. We're always happy to talk with people that are interested in partnering with researchers to try to figure out what works best in improving employee or member financial health. So please don't be shy in reaching out.
And the other thing I would note of future things, as Jeremy noted, being able to do something with sort of these touch points of new onboarding employees is, we think would have a huge opportunity to really sort of immediately get people in and probably have larger take up because they don't have habits yet. They're already filling out direct deposit forms, so it's already less friction in the process. So I think that's a huge opportunity. And then the other thing I would note is actually, we'd love to be able to do deeper things in portals and with vendors, and you kind of need this longer time frame because there's dev work that needs to happen, and it adds a lot of complications. But that would sort of also be a V2 of this, is thinking through how do we partner with the vendors that are actually creating these HR portals, or to really, how do we take all of the friction possible out of this to make it really, really easy in portal, in process, et cetera. So
Stellar. So I know some of you at whether it's credit union or educational employees are looking to either continue this or roll out or bring a broader perspective to this. So I really just want to say thank you all for not only participating in the grant, but this webinar, and of course to those of you who joined the webinar. Stay tuned because a full grant report will be coming soon. So check out our website, and an advanced copy should be coming to your inbox in the next, stay tuned. So this recording also will be available to you all if you're interested. I know I'll be playing it back just to hear and kind of how to integrate those things. But of course, the National Credit Union Foundation has financial well-being resources and studies and assets on not just this project, but so many others. And they're available to you at any time. So if you haven't already, follow us on social media. Go ahead and stay informed and stay connected, of course. And we just look forward to seeing you all at our upcoming events. And with that, be well.